evening. Welcome to the December 8th meeting of the Goffstown Budget Committee. I'll start off with our announcement. In accordance with the Governor's Emergency Order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, the Goffstown Budget Committee will utilize the emergency meeting provisions of RSA 91A to conduct meetings through electronic means while preserving, to the extent feasible, the public's right to notice of such meetings and ability to observe and listen contemporaneously. Public access meeting by telephone, you can call 603-766-JOIN. That's 5646. Once again, 603-766-5646. Participant code 785-645 #. Once again, participant code 785-645 #. Problems with access. Members of the public experience problems with access during the meeting are asked to call 603-384-3624. Access. Watch the meeting live on Goffstown Television Channel 22 or on the GTV Facebook page at www.facebook.com/GoffstownTV. Facebook will not be monitored for public participation during public comment. And I'll start off with a roll call here. Skylar told me he was not going to be here. Dennis, Spencer, Bill Cordis. Bill, I see you there. All right. Greg Flegel.
Hi, I'm here alone.
Thank you, Joe.
I'm here and alone.
Thank you, Eileen.
I'm here and alone.
Thank you, Jeff.
Here and alone.
Thank you, Fred.
Here alone.
I'm here by myself. Richard Manzo.
Here and alone.
Thank you, Richard Fletcher. Richard Fletcher.
Here alone.
Thank you. Jared Talbot.
Here and alone.
Thank you. Elizabeth DeBrell.
Here and alone.
Thank you, and Selectman Lemay.
Here and alone.
All right, thank you. First up, we have public comment. Is there anyone for public comment on the line?
I do not have anybody on the telephone line for public comment.
Great. Thank you. Moving on, we did have the minutes. I personally didn't get a chance to review them. I know we just got them a little while ago, so we'll put that off to our next meeting. Before we get started with deliberations, there was a question that was posed to me that I'd like to get feedback from the committee on sewer. The sewer presentation. Derek, can you just go over the situation with the sewer budget? You're muted.
Thank you. So the Sewer Commission did present to the Budget Committee back, I don't remember the exact date, if they were in October or November. The Sewer Enterprise Fund is a fund that is funded 100% by users of sewer, and there's no tax, no property taxes go towards the running of sewer. I guess my question for the Budget Committee, and that I posed to Cole earlier this week, is would you like to have sewer come back in to deliberate on their budget, or is the sense that the Budget Committee would be all right including that? As again, it's part of the operating budget, but it's a portion that does not impact property taxes at all.
What are folks' thoughts?
What government entity has oversight over that group?
The sewer commissioners are the governing body for the sewer enterprise fund, and they oversee that appropriation and the offsetting revenues. So they run that every year.
So I'm sorry, Derek, do we already have their budget?
Yes, you do. It is part of the
Part of
operating
DPW,
budget.
right?
No, it is not part of DPW. It is on page 26 and 27 of 27. It's our Fund 60. It's the last 2 pages of your expenses.
Can we table that question till later tonight and maybe we take a minute to look over it? I haven't even looked over it yet, but
Yep.
I mean, whether it affects property tax or not, people still have to pay for it. And it's not a negotiable expense. I mean, you pay a flat fee, so I think we still have a responsibility to look over the budget.
Great. So we'll get through our deliberations tonight, and then we'll take a look at that.
Cole,
Pretty confident. Yeah.
so the water precinct budget needs to be presented too.
Yep.
Everybody should have a copy. It was put in the back hallway of the town hall.
I
Yep.
think when we had originally posed that question to Cole, we had talked about doing that after the town budget, so potentially
okay.
the meeting on the 15th.
That's okay. Yeah.
Great.
What about
All
the
right.
Grassmere one?
We have not received it from Grassmere. We can reach out to them and see if they will be presenting to the budget committee.
It'll probably save us another meeting.
All right. Without further ado, we'll pick up on page 13th with DPW.
Hey, folks. Good evening.
Evening.
Give me
All
just
right.
a sec. Give me just a second, and I will
Hold up.
pull that up. But if Adam wanted to start, we can. Or I guess let me share the screen. So you're on page 13 of 27.
All right. So as we've been doing, if you have a question, comment, proposed change, starting on page 13 here.
How do I see the numbers on the screen?
Sorry, what was that, Fred?
I can't see the numbers on the screen.
Is it too small, or are you not seeing it at all?
It's too small.
Okay, do you have your packet?
Yeah.
I can try and zoom in a little bit. There we go.
That helps.
All right. Questions or comments on page 13 here?
So I do have a question, just Adam, in general. I mean, I know you ended up cutting a lot of, not cutting, but delaying a few things, pushing some things back, taking things out to get the numbers down a little bit. What sort of big projects are we looking at for 2021?
So for big projects, I would say if we want to jump to the CIP section, we certainly can. It's up to you folks how you want to go order-wise. We've got I would say the biggest impact to the budget, though, is the vote by the voters last year to add $500,000 back into the road plan and include that in both the proposed or included in the default budget, I should say. So it hit the 2020 budget as an additional 500,000, and then now the default also has to reflect that. So that's probably the biggest increase to the operating side. Project-wise, we've got a couple bridges. Bog Road, both bridges there need some work. We had some numbers from putting that out to tentative, some quiet bid process to see how close our estimates were, and they were higher than we had estimated. So we did some back to the drawing board, and we're going to take those projects on in-house with similar rehabilitation that we've had a good success with around town, both on Pleasant Street with a couple, and some of the box culverts, the larger box culverts on Shirley Hill Road, and over on Parker Station Road. So we're going to try to take those projects on as an in-house deal. So we'll have Bog Road, assuming the budget passes, that project stays in. We'll do both those bridges, and then we've got some money in there for construction of the at the Merrill Road Bridge as well. I may have an update to that project before town meeting. We're working diligently right now trying to whittle that number down for next year, but we had some design money earmarked this year, and I'm going to try to be a little creative and maybe see if we can get some construction done out of that earmarked money from design instead. So we may be able to reduce that number a bit by town meeting, but I'm not quite ready there yet. So as of right now, the plan would still be to put that project out to bid. Let's see, the only other big ticket items, we've got a traffic signal project as we continue on Mass Road. We have we have 5 intersections there that are signalized. We've been seeing increasing numbers annually for traffic signal maintenance as the older equipment fails. So Megan started a project series to work our way through those intersections. We've done one, Pinard Street rather. And this year we had Daniel Plummer, and next year would be Shaw's Plaza. And then beyond that, I think it's Rite Aid and then Hannaford, or maybe vice versa. But anyhow, we're working through that. So Shaw's intersection would be next. And the hope is we were able to coordinate those signals and improve traffic flows on those heavy flow times and days of the year, as well as potentially some improved processing of the actual signals themselves to cut down on delay time. Let's see. Then we've got a traffic study for Grassmere that's been sort of kicked around a little bit in the last couple of years. That one is to really look at the Tibbetts, Locust, Tyrrell Hill, those intersections there, and see if there's any improvements that we can make. Some of those are just going to be the way they're going to be, I think, during high traffic volumes. Not a whole lot of room for construction over there to change things up, but the idea was maybe bring in some professionals to take a look at those and see if there's anything that we haven't thought of yet to improve the safety and the throughput of those intersections, particularly in the mornings during the school rush. And on the equipment side, we have an excavator and a 6-wheel dump plow truck. The hope there with the excavator is we can find something that's a couple years old to save some money on the purchase price, but still get a good piece of equipment that'll last many years. Another late breaking piece there I requested on, it was just last night. Last night's select board meeting, they approved, we're going to apply for a Diesel Emission Reduction Act, which is an EPA program. There's a grant that can provide up to 25% reimbursement if you upgrade your diesel engined equipment. It's higher if you are willing to go for an electric vehicle or propane, something like that, lower emission, but we're not quite ready to go with the Tesla plow trucks just yet. But maybe after we see a few of those, make it through a few winters, we might want to test the water. But anyway, if we can get approval for the Diesel Emission Reduction Act grant, that could be up to $100,000 as a reimbursement of those two pieces of equipment, and that would just go back into the general fund. So there's the hope there on those. Those are the big ticket items. Really, the story of the budget this year, for me anyway, if you want the quick 30-seconder, is that we've got some favorable contract pricing for commodities and some less than favorable trends on recycling and trash. The recycling has leveled off a bit. There was a spike and a worry that it was going to continue pretty steadily upward. Come back down a little bit, about $10 less per ton than we were a year ago this time. But you'll see my costs for both tipping and recycling are reflecting either our contractual rate increases or the expected average rate going forward for the next 12 months. And then let's see the other items. I guess when the price of diesel goes down, it affects DPW's budget more than anybody probably in town, just based on our consumption levels. Maybe fire might be a close second there. So when gas and diesel go down, we benefit certainly due to that. So right now it's a good year for both those two, and Derek's been able to lock in a great contract for that. The only other ticker tape item that I'll leave for you before I open back up to other questions, if you'd like, is part-time wages. We had a lot of trouble this year with seasonal employees for both divisions, both highway and cemetery operations. We filled one of our 8 positions for seasonal folks, and that's the 16 weeks. So that's a good, significant piece of the year that we're down there, seven people out of the 8, in addition to a few vacancies in our full-time staff. So it was kind of a strange summer in that respect. But in order to maybe try to entice some folks next season, we've added $1 to the starting wage for our seasonal folks to $16 an hour, hoping that we might be able to get a few more either recent graduates or college students out of the woodwork.
Adam,
Yes, sir.
the Henry Bridge project down there, is that done and finished?
Let's see. We're looking at page 22, maybe, or on the CIP. So we had, I only asked because we've got, we finished this year, we had a maintenance, some major maintenance that was done to the abutments that had been budgeted, and we were able to get that done in the spring. The DOT rejected our request a few years ago to add full replacement of that bridge to the state aid program, which is the 80% state funding, 20% local funding program. They said that we hadn't, it's kind of a moving target, but they said we hadn't done enough intermediate maintenance on our own to maintain that bridge to justify requesting the state replace it fully. It's, I think 26 years old maybe right now. And in their mind, that wasn't quite long enough to already be requesting. Even if the state aid program is 6 or 7 years out right now, they didn't feel that 31 years was enough time to request a brand new bridge. So they kind of directed to go back to the drawing board and do some maintenance in the intermediate term to extend the life of that bridge, and then they would think about in the future adding it back into state aid. So right now we've got it in the out years of CIP as a get the ball started with the engineering and try to get the state to buy into at that point it might be closer to 40 years old, a replacement of the arched bridge anyway. So we did a little bit this year, a good bit this year, and then that will hopefully buy us some time to be able to keep the bigger project in the out years and get that state aid funding. So we do have it both in the rear view and in the windshield, so to speak.
Very good.
So are road plan expenses are they spread throughout the operating budget, or are they concentrated under CIP?
A little bit of both, primarily under CIP. That's where the biggest amount of it is. So this year it's a $1.6 between the, let's see if you get a page number, maybe I could, if you look on, sounds right, thank you, 23 under 43-111 Public Works Highway. You'll see our reclamation line. It's got a 1.1, and then, probably not showing up here is the special, right, Derek, for that added the money back in.
So we've got 1.6 last year when the voters voted. There was 1.1 in the operating budget last year and a separate article for 500,000 from fund balance, and then directed the select board to include that in the operating budget. So that's what the select board has done. They've maintained that $1.6 million in CIP.
So there's that increase I was mentioning there where the 2020 budget line looked like 1.1. Reality, townwide, we had the 1.6, but it hits the operating budget completely in 2021 based on that vote. So you'll see the jump there. And then back in the operating budget, we've got resurfacing line, sidewalk repairs. We've got some bridge repair money. There is, let's see, what else? Sand and gravel. We've got some money there. So all those kind of come together, and we try to do a little bit of as best we can anyway. There's almost always some bridge work to be done no matter what road you're on, even if it's not part of the official road plan. There's bridge work to be done, but there's always gravel to be had, and some of these are for smaller drainage, one-off drainage projects. We try to be true to that line and not dip into the road plan if it's a one-off type thing. But certainly sidewalk repairs. I think if you look at the sidewalk maintenance line, it's pretty well underspent as of when this was generated, but we've got some bills coming in for our Tyler Drive project that was just wrapped up a couple weeks back. And then East Union Street has some outstanding money, which is looking like I might have to get encumbered to get that one finished. But so we try to pepper some sidewalk maintenance into the actual road plan if we can. And if there's not, then sometimes you can target those for either ADA improvements, tip downs, curbing replacements, that sort of thing. So a little bit of both. The majority of it, of course, is in the CIP, but that resurfacing line is pretty big. Those tend to get backloaded, so we'll be responding to some pretty big invoices here through, I'm sure, into January, just for work that's outstanding. It takes them quite a while to get all their ducks in a row and get all the invoices to us at the end of the season from the paving company primarily. But that resurfacing line tends to be more for the overlay streets, and we try to use the road plan money itself mainly for our reclamation lines, which those projects cost a lot more per square yard than just the overlay of a road that might be due for a 10-year paving.
Okay, Fred Platt, 245 traffic light repair.
Yes, sir.
It's bouncing around 3,500 department head, 9,000 default, 3,500 select board. Why such a high default?
The 2020 budget was in at 9,000, and that was based on some historical trends where that I think I didn't create the 2020 budget, but I believe for a few years in a row it had been at 9,000. I brought that down both because of the 2019 actuals, planned actuals for 2020, and then the thought was that as we've included these intersections in our CIP here for successive years, we started with the worst first. So in theory, our annual maintenance costs of these aging intersections are going to go way down because we're no longer replacing, half or 2/3 of a cabinet's worth of electronics, here and there, one fell swoop. We still have lightning strikes and loop replacements if some of the loop gets damaged or the pavement's real thin or something like that. So they do come up, but I'd like to at least, with a nod towards those CIP projects, say with the benefit, one of the benefits of that is that we're able to reduce our operating costs too as those get replaced and get updated. But that default line has got to be in at whatever the 2020 budget number was.
Great. So, are there any questions on what I was just talking about? Any of the bigger projects?
Cole, this is Jared. I know that we're bouncing around a little bit.
Yeah.
But maybe we can talk a little bit more. Just looking into the reclamation line, it only looks through the end of October that we've only spent roughly 1.05 million out of the 1.6 million budget. Are we expecting more bills to come in for that for the remainder of this year?
Great. And just so for folks know, that's on page 23, if you want to look at that, and then a lot of the other projects he was talking about are on page 22.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. We do, they do tend to be backloaded, and when they come, they're pretty large because just the way that they, that we tend to have a big flurry of activity near the end of the year to get things, finally buttoned up, things that might have been lingering or as other towns start to run out of money, we become the prime place for some of these projects. So we get a lot of attention early season, a lot of attention end season. I think we just sent down the other day a $290,000 invoice, for example, for a couple of the roads a month or so ago that had been done, but they do lag quite a bit. And I think, unfortunately, for us and for finance, sometimes into January, we start to look at trying to close the annual books, and we're still waiting on a big invoice. But generally speaking, yep, we'll get right to there. And then normally I'll come to the board with an encumbrance request too. So the two things that we would encumber into the next fiscal year would be roads that were on the official road plan that might not have been finished for whatever reason, or streets that were base paved. We try to encumber enough money for the subsequent fiscal year that we are able to fund topping those roads. So we've got a healthier budget than we have now. It's kind of a practice that was more from the thinner years, but it's held up well. That when we base pave our roads, we let them winter over one season just to see if there's any heaving action or anything. And it's usually a good investment. Sometimes we'll see problems that we can fix, and then you haven't just topped the whole road, and then you find out that there was a problem with settlement, and you get cracking all over a brand new road. So sometimes it saves us face too. But one of the things that needs to happen there, you hate to be in a situation where we may be in the past anyway, in a default budget scenario. I guess this could happen any year. You're in a default budget scenario and you don't have enough money to pave over roads that are half done, so to speak. So maybe a good example, Sarah Drive was a half paved road. That was by a developer, but it was left, and years later now you've got grass poking up through the thin pavement because it was never topped and heavy enough to withstand that load. And so there's a few of those around town, and we hate to be in that situation where we've got a super thin road now going forward because we didn't have enough money to pick it up. So that's been our practice, is to, if there's a few of those, we'll encumber the money for that. And then if there was anything that for whatever reason dropped off, we try to encumber for that as well. But generally the thought is, this is what we've been budgeted. We try to spend as much as we possibly can. We know the faster we can get through these, the hope at some point is we can start to taper down how much we spend, and we're in more of a maintenance mode. But right now we just have 30 to, I guess, 40% of the town is in a below average condition. So we're trying to catch up.
Great, thank you.
Great. Would love to take any other questions folks have on the Oh yeah, go Richard.
The diesel fuel line shows that it was it's only 33,000 spent of a budget of in 220 of 113,000 appropriated. So there must be an error or something in that line, isn't there?
Let's see. I could probably, if you give me a minute here afterwards, I could probably jump over into Munis and take a look at actuals to date. Sometimes what happens with diesel. So a couple things for 2020, I will say, and the reason it's the proposed number for 21 is so much lower than 2020 is due to that great contract that Derek locked us into. I think we're already seeing the benefit of some of those lower rates here at the tail end. So we're not spending quite as fast at the end of the year as was budgeted. But primarily coming into the year, we had a pretty mild spring and late winter. So a lot of our diesel gets spent on those storm response. So both our diesel line, our overtime, and actually a third item, our salt lines, we were in pretty good shape coming out of the winter of 2019 into 20. Which was the beginning, and usually the biggest part of the winter maintenance budget for the calendar year is at the beginning, not the tail end, unless you have a crazy December, knock on wood. So we kind of had a great winter, public works speaking. We didn't have to get out there quite as much, so we drove around, less time on the vehicles, less salt used, less overtime, and that kind of helped us out. What that also does going forward is not really a science, more of an art, but we try to take a look at average consumptions of those commodities and of diesel fuel and salt. So going forward, as we try to project, some of those higher expenditure years drop off. So as we have a nice year like we just had, that affects our 5-year moving average. So a little bit of that plays into it too with the lower amount for 2021 rather. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, if I may. The current actuals on that diesel line are just about $60,000 year to date. Additionally, on that diesel line, it gets pre-charged to DPW when a delivery comes in, and then gets dispersed out to the individual departments as they consume the diesel. So that line tends to go up and down when you're looking at a year-to-date report. And the report before you tonight is the snapshot as of 10/31.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle.
All right, folks, so we're all over the place here. Anything on page 13 where we started off? Cemetery operations, and then starting on public work highway. All right, if we're good there, on 14, we already talked about the traffic lights and the diesel on here. All right. Questions here on page 14?
Sidewalk maintenance. It looks like we haven't spent what we appropriated for, but we still asked for the same amount this year.
We've got some bills still anticipated for either work that's complete or work that, depending on the we will try to complete. So Tyler Drive and East Union Street both had sidewalk work this year, and some of that's still outstanding.
Okay.
That one can tend to be one that trips me up, just to kind of give you the inside baseball too, because sometimes I'll forget that a road that we just paved and paved the sidewalk had sidewalk on it, so we'll pay the invoice and it'll come out of the reclamation line or the resurfacing line, depending on what the project was. And then after the fact, I'll say shoot and call Danielle and ask her to recode because there was some sidewalk there. So I can't promise there's not some of that happened too.
Other questions or comments on 14? Hearing none, we'll move on to 15 here. Questions on 15?
Hi, this is Jeff O'Brien. Can we go over the fleet maintenance? Are we expecting any large fleet maintenance through the end of the year to bring the actuals closer up to what was budgeted?
We do have a few bigger ticket items that for both fleet maintenance and the painting and recon line. In particular, we've got some pretty heavy maintenance to our dozer. We've also got a few invoices that for both November and December that are in some various stage of either being paid or have already been paid. So that line is another one finance may be able to give us a little closer up to date. We are projected to be a little low on that end, but we just learned the other day that our scale at the transfer station as part of its inspection had some visible failures, but also once we had the men in the pit to look below, they see some pretty significant repairs needed there. So that's a line that I'm kind of thinking might not have as much surplus as we had hoped. And maybe to take a little bit of a step back too, there was the department heads had recommended to the board that we take a look at lines that were a surplus from 2020 for various reasons and put that money back into to offset the tax rate for 2021. And fleet maintenance is one line that had a little bit extra in it. And part of that may just be the less wear and tear on the vehicles as we put less miles on and less hours on there at the early part of the year as well. So that's another one that I probably should have mentioned too, with the lighter winters. You know, those truck hours are pretty significantly reduced. So that plays out with the amount of repairs that are needed too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions there? All right. Hearing none, we'll go to 16.
Hey, Adam. This is Joe Alexander. Can we, I missed the public hearing on the recycling. Can you talk to me a little bit about the $25,000 increase from the default?
Sure. So what I do for recycling is the majority of that line is driven by our average tonnage. And then with recycling, we've got a variable rate per ton by contract that tracks against the recycling commodities market. There's an index that it tracks. So usually, we have a minimum. So I think the minimum is either 2.5% or 3%, but then it varies depending on how that recycling commodity. So it's good for the town and good use, but it protects, of course, the recycling vendors when the world commodity market tanks like it did a few years back. So
okay, I do know last year we went down about $40,000, and I remember doing that. Are you finding that you're going to spend over what was budgeted this year?
I think we're going to be close. What that 176 number entails is our average tonnage of 2,100 tons for the year, and then I looked at the last 12 calendar years worth of rates, recycling rates, since they bounce around so much. And I used a rate of 77.50, which is 10 cents below what the 12-month average was, looking back. So to give you an idea, we were into the 80s a couple times this year, $80 per ton. Right now, we're down to $66 a ton. So if November went on for 12 months, I could cut that number back probably closer to that 150, but it changes every month. So I tried to use the annual average as a best guess. I think in 2019, I'd have to go back and look. I think Megan had used $85 a ton. That was it was she created the budget right after the Chinese put a kind of a hold on all incoming recycling material unless it was like 0.5% residual trash. So she kind of had a immediacy effect there of that bad news, and she tried to at least put a number on there that we wouldn't overshoot. So we found that we didn't in fact go that high, and it kind of swung back the other way a little bit, as you see for actuals. So we came back down to earth a little bit, but then it started to creep back up over this past 12-month period. So I just tried to use the average tonnage times that rate. And then there's a little bit extra in there for we also recycle our propane tanks, tires, electronics. So there's the price of those has gone up a little bit, but it's smaller numbers. So it's about $12,000 for the propane, electronics, and tires, and about $1,000 for we have a trailer rental that we pay for all the tires from that vendor.
Mr. Chair, Fred Platt.
Yep, go Fred.
What's the disposal rate for trash?
So the rate that you see there, or the increase that you see there, is contractual. So that's locked in. Right now, we're paying $55.34 per ton. So for 2021, I budgeted our average tonnage for the first 3 months of the year times 55.34, and then the remaining 4,000 tons of the year at the new rate, which will be 57.12 for the back 2/3 of the year.
It's going to kill me to say this because I was instrumental in getting single-stream recycling going several years ago. But is it worth the candle anymore?
It is. That question came up pretty. It was on the lips of many in 2019 when that spike was starting to, or I guess late 2018 when the spike was happening. Sort of drew the red line. If recycling goes above about $83 off the top of my head, I think was the number. It starts to be cheaper to dispose of it in a landfill. A couple things work against us, which may not right off the top seem like you'd think they would. We bring our trash north to New Hampshire, mostly an uphill haul with a full truck and a downhill with an empty truck. So to get material to Bethlehem takes longer, more amount of fuel, repairs, the prorated bit versus Charlestown for the recycling. So that piece costs us a little more. And then the folks at the landfill are running out of space, as you might have seen on the state news that they were denied their expansion request. And there's really not a great plan yet for where the next landfill is going to open, if there will be a next one. So they're telling us that if we want to start bringing recyclable materials to the landfill, they're going to actually have to charge us a premium for that, because recycling has a higher bulking factor, which means that for 1 cubic yard of material, it actually weighs less than trash. And so therefore it takes up more landfill space per ton. So paying by the ton, but it's taking up more space than a ton of trash. They're going to charge us 20 to 30% more for that material, because that's the bulking factor. So then you start to lose on that savings by disposing of it in landfill. Not to mention, of course, the environmental perspective. So the calculus that was made and presented to the board a couple of years ago was, here's our red line where we actually start to be better off financially if we throw it away versus recycling. But once you lose that capacity as a town to recycle and get to the level of recycling we have, and the trends and the habits, it's hard to get them back. So if we ever ditch the recycling program, it'd be a bear to get it back. And if we're just going to touch $80 to $85 every now and then, we can sustain that in the board's eyes. And right now, certainly we're in the 60s and lower 70s. So the hope is that we can kind of stay there, and it still makes good financial sense as well as the environmental sense. But a couple bills were up at the state level. Maybe some of our state reps could talk about those too if they want. But a couple were vetoed, I think. But I anticipate we'll see a few more this coming year as well, to start to look into measures such as composting. Some trends toward reducing the amount of waste that's landfilled, some goal numbers, that sort of thing. So we're going to try some stuff locally here. I'd like to get a pilot program for composting. Kind of neat, sounds great. It's hard to make a huge dent in our numbers, but we have to start somewhere. And as a state, I think it looks like we're going to be trending that way too. But there's some laws about composting dairy in particular, that dairy and meats, that make it hard to get a lot of tonnage out of the waste stream. So we'll be looking for the state to kind of lead on that piece, but we're going to try to do our part too, and maybe get some grant money to help start up a pilot program for some curbside composting in addition to what we already provide.
What's the difference between hauling it to Bethlehem or taking it to Boscawen?
So Boscawen would certainly be a shorter haul. But when we renewed the contract, they were not accepting any more waste. So we didn't even have that as an option.
Okay.
That's another thing that we may see, is both a new recycling processing facilities to separate these single stream sources. There may be some federal funding, I could imagine, based on this whole kind of sword program that would have more of these facilities open that could process single stream, but also maybe waste to energy plants might become more enticing as the landfill space dwindles rapidly.
Great, thank you for all the information. Any other questions or comments there? All right, hearing none, we'll just jump to page 22 quickly one more time for CIP. Adam went over a lot of it, but if there's any questions there or on 23.
Looking at the page, I think the only thing off the top of my head that I missed earlier was our live floor trailer, if I didn't mention it. So we've got 102,000 under solid waste operations, machinery and equipment. That one probably sounds familiar. It was a 2020 approved CIP item that was deferred as part of the budget process last year. Subsequently was not able to pass its overweight certification inspection. So that means it's about 20,000 pounds less it can haul per run because it can't get up to that 99,000 pound limit. So we really do need that one to get replaced so we can get those full loads back to Bethlehem, because when you want to go up there, you want to go with a full load, not with the 75 or 80% full.
Questions 22 or 23? All right, hearing none, that would wrap up DPW. Thank you.
Oh, thanks everybody. Hope my baby wasn't too loud in the background.
All right, very good. Now we have Parks and Rec, page 17. All right, is Rick here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. All right, so folks have questions on page 17 here. Rick, what's the part-time situation like? I know we've had issues there in the past too, and I imagine this year created a bunch of challenges and whatnot.
Well, this year with the whole COVID situation, you see a lot of lines that aren't fully spent, hence the program line, hence the salary line, pool operation line. So those areas, we're not able to run programs for this calendar year. And as far as the salaries go, what we're proposing, if we had a full staff with non-COVID, we have an increase in that line of like $5,000. And what the lion's share of that is in our ground supervisor area or ground maintenance area. We were paying our kids $12, $13 an hour. Highway was paying $15 an hour, and we're kind of competing with one another. So we brought ours up to $15 an hour, and I know they brought theirs up to 16, but I think it's still trying to be marketable and be able to hire the people you need to hire. Other increases in that are basically, little increases in not position. There's no new positions whatsoever. It's just increases in 22 summertime, part-time, or full summer seasonal help.
Great, thank you.
We're probably looking at giving back, as Adam was saying earlier, probably about $78,000 will be returned in 2020. $76, $78.
So, hi, Rick. This is Elizabeth DeBrule.
Welcome, Elizabeth.
How you doing?
Doing well.
So I guess, I mean, your department, I think, was more impacted by COVID than almost any other,
Yes.
as far as what you could offer. And so it makes sense why you've budgeted 2021 as like a fully operational year. And
Correct.
we certainly all hope that, like, at some point in 2021 that becomes true and it does become a fully operational year. But I guess I wonder why should we have budgeted less at the beginning of the year, knowing that you're not going to be able to do most of your programs, right, until at least the spring.
Well, the one program that we have for basically January through March is the basketball program. And I just got word today that we will be able to run a smaller version of our basketball program. So we won't use all those monies for that specific time frame, but we'll use a good portion of it, you know? And then, as you just said, I think when spring comes, I think that being outdoors, I think you will be able to run every single one of those programs, you know, with whatever guidelines are set forth by CDC, the governor, et cetera. And then I think come summertime, I think we're going to be in a much better situation. So.
Okay, so you actually are anticipating that basically next year is going to be almost back to normal.
I think that's a really crystal ball thing to say and ask. You know, do you go and say, okay, let's cut all these by 50%, and then all of a sudden everything's a go? Where do you get your money to go?
Right.
I don't know, Elizabeth. I mean, I respect what you're saying, and I see what you're saying. That it is a challenge, but I think positive, and I think that I really do think that from spring on, we're going to be able to do things. Absolutely.
Okay. That's fair enough.
Other questions here?
I have another one if nobody else is asking one. What's the status with the sports complex?
It's awesome. It's the first phase, the two full-size rectangular fields are fully complete. We're actually, the only thing we have remaining to close it out, phase one, is just the front entry gates and a couple other gates down in the internal part of the complex. But no, everything went pretty darn good. You know, knock on wood. I think the worst thing for us was the summer drought. That was really hard and challenging. But other than that, as far as the work went, things went right on time, ahead of time. And we really stayed pretty good on the budget too. I mean, we were pretty right in with what we had. So that worked out really well. So what we're hoping is that we get the spring season, we'll put some more seed down on it and do everything we have to do to doctor her up, give her a fertilizer, give her some lime, and hopefully maybe spring of 2021, we can get some foot traffic on it.
Great.
That line too, if you notice, that's the water line. That line did increase, okay? And that is a portion of that, actually the lion's share of that increase is for that one complex.
Great. If there's no more questions there, there's just improvements expense on page 23 under CIP.
Our 2021 CIP is for an electronic message sign. That's been in our CIP for quite a long time and kind of gets kicked down the road. And here it is. It's still there. And that's a sign that would actually be out in the front of the recreation building, kind of like in between the tree line area and the rail trail. So that's our 2020.
Similar to what's outside the police department.
Yes, correct. And our thought is with that mess, we can put any town needed information on it. You know, kind of make it more a community needed type of thing, plus for what our information is needed.
Right. Any other questions for Rick or anything in the budget for Parks and Rec? All right, hearing none. Thank you very much, Rick.
Thank you, guys.
Moving on to library on page 19.
Hey, Diane, this is Joe. Do you mind talking to me a little bit about the tuition reimbursement line, why we're funding that this year?
I didn't catch all that, Joe. Which line?
Diane's here. Tuition reimbursement, so it's line 44,200.
Yes, we have one staff member eligible for tuition reimbursement per our personnel manual. So that is her first year of reimbursement costs. We don't fund that line every year, only when there's a request.
What's the degree, Diane? Is somebody getting a master's or?
Yes, she's getting a master's in library science. She's our teen services person, and we really want her to have a master's degree.
All right,
Question?
question?
Yep.
Let's say we fund that and then the person involved walks. What guarantee is they're gonna stay an employee for long enough to pay for the money we put in?
That's built into our personnel manual, so there is a requirement that they stay with us for a specific length of time, depending how many classes we help fund.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Diane, how much do you see this being funded in the years to follow? Like, do you see there being more requests to get the degree? Are we funding the entire degree or a portion of it, or what does that look like?
We fund 50% of the degree, and it's definitely based on whether the money is in the budget or not. So I believe her program's a 2-year program.
Does she have to, how long does she have to stay after?
I
She
don't
gets
have the
the degree.
personnel manual with me, but I think it's 3 years.
Diane, does it mirror the language of the town's personnel plan?
It might.
For the town side, if the town pays 50% of an employee's master's degree, there's a 3-year that they need to stay on, and if they leave before that, then there's a prorated payback that the town would receive.
Thanks, Derek.
The library has a long history too of retaining the people who earn master's degrees. So the last few people who have earned master's degrees are well beyond the 3-year mark. I mean, they've been here now for more than a decade. So we're certainly getting the benefit of that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, we have very dedicated staff, and we really work hard to make sure that we keep our staff. I did pull up a copy of the library's personnel policy and confirm that that is a 3-year look back period for a master's degree. Thanks, Danielle.
Other questions here? Page 19, and then there's one line on the next page if folks want to look at that too. Any other questions here?
I have one more. So Diane, I'm getting my years muddled, but I seem to remember the state changed the amount of support they were giving to the library, to the GMELCS program in the state van. I can't remember if that was last year or this year.
Oh, no, that's probably 5 years ago or so.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, that's been a while now where we have had to pay our own courier delivery to move materials between us. Yeah.
Okay. They haven't downshifted any other costs?
Not to date. However, there's a lot of discussion about our online magazine service going away in 2021. The state library is not going to fund it. So that's a whole nother discussion that we'll have to have next year if that happens.
Is that well used, the magazine subscription?
Well, most librarians and library directors believe that having access to a magazine index and full text articles is a core service of libraries. However, there's a big distinction with the state library who funds it, and they don't believe that it's used well enough to fund it any longer. So we're having a little debate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, this is Greg with Legal. Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering, line 47,400, back on page 19, books and publications. Looks like not a lot of money spent this year. Is that a result of COVID? Are we not buying things, or what's going on with that line?
During the beginning of COVID, so we're talking probably 4 or 5 months, we had our staff at home for 2 months, and then we weren't able to even purchase books because our distributor was closed. So even if we wanted to, we could not get physical materials. So we're quite behind in our purchasing this year because there's a capacity to how much we can process at any given time.
What about 2 lines down on the computers and communication?
That line is nearly gone at this point. So I know that this is an October report, but much more money's been spent since this was printed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the questions.
Other questions here? All right, hearing none. Diane, in the presentations, I know I'm not sure if it was going to be a special article or whatnot, but can you just discuss what's gone on there?
Yeah, I have Amy Hunteman, the chair of the Library Board of Trustees, and she'll talk to you about the warrant article that you received today after we were at the select board last night.
Yep, I'm here. Can you all hear me? So originally, we went to the select board with a warrant article for more money, which was partially funded by the library and partially funded by the town. And the select board did not agree to put that onto the ballot. So we went back to them last night with the one that you can see on your screen. This allows a warrant article that authorizes us to spend $95,000 of trustee-held money. And it won't impact the tax rate, but it will still let us do a smaller portion of the original article's work. And I can answer questions on that.
I have a question, Amy. Haven't we already done a library feasibility study? So I'm trying to figure out what the reason for even hiring a construction manager would be, other than the fact that we already know what we need to construct because we've already done a study.
So the study is currently ongoing. We're wrapping it up now. The next step would be hiring on a construction manager for pre-construction costs. That would allow us to put together a realistic budget for actual construction costs. It also allows us to hire a fundraiser to help with a capital campaign and to set a realistic goal for what we could raise through the foundation that we've put together to offset the cost of the total project for the town. The article also covers things like a survey of the boundary and the topography. It covers geotechnical things, just a bunch of things that will help us to get even more realistic, like actual real firm numbers for the project. Have you looked at the library website? I know that it's up, all the plans, the drawings and things like that are up. You can access that and you can see what the project looks like right now. We'll still have community forums to get more input and to see what's going on. We have at our next meeting next week, we'll have another meeting with the engineering side of our the people that we're working with, McFarland Johnson, and they will show us the plans with more changes even actually. So those will go up on the website after we see them, I think. But things we're behind the project and we want to move forward as much as we can. We believe that expanding and renovating the library will benefit the town in a lot of different ways for a long time in the future.
Great, thank you. One more question. How much is currently in the trust fund, the library trustee fund?
It's about $300,000. Might be a little bit more than that. I know I have another check that I have to sign, but not all of that is unrestricted. Some of it's restricted to certain things. So it's about $300,000 right now, but I'm not sure what the split is.
Thank you very much.
Amy, can you just let folks know how money gets into that fund?
Yep, of course. So the money that is in the library is a little bit unique for a lot of reasons. We have our own governing board, but we also are one of the few town departments that can hold our own money. And that money comes from bequests and donations. I think we have a little bit of stock, sales of stock, things like that. And that's where that money comes from. So people can donate to the library. They can, we have a lot of memorial things where when someone passes on, that their family members will donate money for specific books. We have one now that I think the woman loved mysteries and knitting and gardening. So we're doing a lot of that for one of our former patrons. So there's money that's restricted, but we get money from people. A few years ago, we got a bequest of $86,000 from a patron too. So that's where that money comes from.
Thank you. Any questions on that article? All right. Or anything else in the library budget while they're here?
Cool. Can I just put an offer out to you guys?
Yeah.
We offer this every year. If you would like to take a tour of the library as is and see all of the places where we shove things and how packed it is, Diane, you can call Diane at the library, 497-2102, right? And she will schedule a tour for you, masks, hand sanitizer, social distance, but she can show you all the places and all the things if you're interested in that as well.
Thank you. Great. Hearing nothing else there, thank you very much, Amy. Thank you very much, Diane.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. So we said we were going to discuss sewer. I mean, I don't want to just look it over. Derek, would we be able to ask Tim to see if he's available or someone else from there is available for the next meeting?
Yes, we will make that request of them.
Great. And then also go over water precincts budgets at the next meeting. And then ideally, we would make final recommendations and put the budget to a public hearing. Correct, Eric?
Well, I think that would be up to your discretion this evening. I would speak on behalf of the department heads that if there were any other questions, we do have all the department heads on this evening. And as it's been a very long, difficult year for department heads, if we can move at least the general fund portion to public hearing or make any modifications tonight, I think that would be appreciated.
I have no issue with that. But obviously looking for input from other folks. So what we've gone over with the departments be wrapped up in the general fund, and that wouldn't include the water precinct, sewer, or special article recommendations, correct?
No, and at this point, the budget committee does not need to make any votes on the special articles. I would just ask that you move them to public hearing, and then we could discuss them in that night, and then the budget committee could make a vote to recommend or not recommend after the public hearing.
So, Mr. Chairman, are you looking for a motion?
So, Derek, what would the motion be? And do we have a number?
So if you look at, you have in the front of your packet, there's an 11 by 17 sheet of paper that is dated November 20th, 2020. I believe what we'd be asking you to do is move the general fund budget of $21,854,213 along with the EMS revenue fund total of $834,764. I think the only change that I had talked to you, Cole, about is on page
The police.
23 of the budget under CIP, or not 23, I'm sorry, it's on page 22. Let me bring that up one more time. Thank you for the reminder. Let's see. So during the police chief's presentation last week, we noticed that there was $25,000 in CIP for the locker room expansion. And as the police chief was presenting, he explained that he had reduced that number and put it in his operating budget under his facility line. There was a bit of miscommunication, so it would be appropriate for you to reduce this line, the 25,000 under buildings, and then move forward with the budget without that, if that's the budget committee's pleasure.
I make a motion, but I lost track of all those numbers.
So if the budget committee were to reduce this $25,000 for, again, the project is still in the operating budget. It just lives at a reduced amount in the police operations. But we would be asking for a general fund total of $21,854,188. Nope. Danielle, can you do a quick math for me?
The figure we're looking for is $24,844,592 for the general fund operating budget.
That includes sewer though, doesn't it? I think we just looking for the general fund portion.
Nope. I apologize. Let me grab that for you. $21,829,213.
I move to public hearing the amount 21,829. Was it what?
213.
213 for the operating budget. Move that to public hearing.
I heard 21,000. Fred, could you just restate the number one more time?
21,000,008. I'm subtracting 15, right? Eight. Do it again, and I'll take your number.
Yep, it's $21,829,213.
That's what I said. 829,213.
Is there a second?
Do we need to vote on getting rid of the 25,000 for that, please?
That would be included in this motion, is my understanding.
Okay.
Is that number?
I'll second it.
I think I heard a second from Elizabeth.
Cole, can I make a suggestion before you go through the roll call?
Yes. I'll open it up for discussion too before that.
If Fred is willing to modify, but also include the EMS revenue fund total, so we can button that up this evening. That is the $834,764 that you see on page 1. Then that would just leave the sewer enterprise fund to discuss next week.
Okay, I don't see that number anywhere.
That is on page, I guess, 25 of 27. It's also on the 8.5 by, or I'm sorry, yeah, the 8.5 by 17 sheet of paper on the front. About the middle under operating budget expenses. The operating budget includes the general fund, the EMS special revenue fund, and the sewer enterprise fund. but that the 834,764 is at page 25 of 27 in the detail.
Okay, I see the 834.
Would you like the figure for the revised or proposed revised motion?
I'd be happy to, but I'm still lost on the number. I see the 834,764, but that's reduced, is it not?
No, that's the current amount in the EMS revenue fund. It's kind of difficult because, again, for the benefit of the department heads, it'd be great if we could button up the general fund and EMS, but because you want to talk about the sewer enterprise fund next week, they all fall under the operating budget, but for purposes of buttoning it up, it'd be great if we could at least pull the general fund and the EMS fund and kind of button those up tonight.
All right, I revised my motion to increase the amount by 834,764, which includes the CIP Special Revenue Fund.
The EMS Special Revenue Fund.
But EMS Special Revenue Fund.
Thank you.
And I second.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. All right, so the motion on the table includes the general fund and the EMS revenue fund. Discussion there.
It's Elizabeth again. So I think that this budget is very solid. I think it's very, very lean. In fact, I'm a little worried it's a little too lean because, as Adam pointed out earlier, sometimes there's consequences for making cuts in maintenance, just as he talked about with the bridge. But the thing that is really keeping me up at night, and this is not necessarily within our control, but I think the selectmen should pay attention to this, is how much money we are using from that unreserved fund balance to artificially decrease the tax rate. It is not sustainable, and it is going to come back and bite us in the butt because there's going to be a huge tax spike in next year or the year after. And I also think that the selectmen, I know they were trying to help people out, but I think the premise that they used was faulty. Their idea was we had to keep a level tax rate because so many people in town are hurting for money right now. That is only partially true. A lot of people in town are not. They aren't any worse off than they were before COVID because they're still getting paid and their expenses went down. It's the people who fell under that line, who have certain kind of jobs that are hurting, and they're going to need more than a level tax rate. They're going to need more assistance than that. So I think this is a big mistake to put $2 million of unreserved fund balance into covering general operating expenses. It's way too much money. It's way too much. The $600,000 that we went under budget this year, that's all good. We usually put about $400,000 in, and that's fine if it's consistent and solid. But to add another $1 million, that makes me really nervous. And that, Derek, I don't know if you can pull up that chart you had at the beginning that showed the two lines.
Yep, give me just a second. I do have it ready to go.
But that's a really worrisome trend that's going on. That we are not covering our operating expenses through the regular course of an event. We're basically paying Peter to rob Paul, or robbing Paul to pay your people, whatever the expression is. So not this one, Derek, though the other one, the one with the green bars on it.
Oh, yeah. Can you give me just a second? This does shows for the benefit of the budget committee. This red line is our unassigned fund balance and how it's grown since 2010. So we're up now. We're just above at tax rate setting. We're at about $7.1 million.
But that's a different issue than the one I'm talking about. So what I'm talking about is the discrepancy between how much we're spending and how much we're pulling in for taxes. And we can't close that gap all at once. We're going to have to start doing it incrementally. But to do anything else is irresponsible.
All right, I'll have it for you just a second.
So is Mark here? Mark LeMay?
I am. I'm listening, Elizabeth. I have my comment coming in a minute. Derek, while you're looking for that, can I just make a comment? For Cole, is it okay?
Go for it.
So basically, Elizabeth, the number that we come up with is given to us every year by the accountant. He is well aware of the numbers, and he keeps us, again, in that safe zone so that we don't end up in the troubles of what you're talking about. I understand and agree what you're talking about, but the number that we have left is a number that's been, I guess, worked over or chosen by the accountant, and the accountant and the board of selectmen feel that that's comfortable to be with. That's why we took the money that we took and put it with the unfunded mandated fund balance.
So Elizabeth, is this the information you were talking about?
No, I still think it was a different one. Didn't you have one with green bars on it? And maybe I just
Well,
didn't
this might be the one. The green bars represent what we've collected in tax effort from 2009 through 2020, and that's grown at a rate of about at 1.45% average annual increase. And then from 2009 to 2020, our general fund appropriation, which includes any general fund special articles, has grown at 1.8% annual increase. And then I think the other information that's not shown here is over that same period, inflation has grown at 1.85. So now some of the reason we've been able to keep the tax effort growing at a slower rate than the appropriation is that use of fund balance, but it's also the use of grant programs, whether it be the SAFER grant or some of the other grants that the other departments have been able to take advantage of. So it's not all fund balance, but you know, that is really what that gap is showing.
But even when you have a big gap like that, even if you are looking at grants, then the grants go from, then you end up putting your department heads in this situation where they are every year frantically trying to get grants just to cover operating expenses. And the more time they're spending writing grants, the less time they have to be managing their department. This is a house of cards. We should not be borrowing this much money and using this much money for operating expenses. It is a mistake.
Hi,
I
Elizabeth.
really
Mark,
object,
this is
Mark.
Jeff.
I'm here. I'm listening, Elizabeth.
What does the state of New Hampshire recommend that you have for a fund balance?
I'm sorry. I think I heard Jeff going there, and then we'll get to Richard Fletcher's question. Jeff, did you have a comment?
Yes, I kind of had a comment here too. You know, obviously regarding the budget itself, when we look at the full amount of what was budgeted versus what is spending, anything left over is what's going in that unreserved fund balance. And then in turn, we're using that to obviously fund, you know, additional projects or operating expenses. Now, given that there's only, you know, 3 weeks left in the year, you know, how are we looking just from a grand total of what we had budgeted for this year, which is what is proposed to be being spent, and is that discrepancy kind of partially fueling that decision mark of, well, we can probably put 2 million of unassigned fund balance towards the operating budget because we're going to have a surplus.
Mark, can I chime in on that one, please?
Sure, go ahead. I was thinking for an answer, but go ahead.
So when the Select Board made their final vote on their budget on November 23rd. Department heads did look at what we projected for surplus. So on the meeting on the November 23rd, at that time, we were projecting that there'd be a surplus of $682,000. That's $682,000 that would be going back into fund balance at the end of 2020. So the board made the decision right off the top, as was recommended by department heads, to use $600,000 of that surplus, which would be coming from fund balance when we set the tax rate, but to use that $600,000 of that surplus to offset the budget increase. And then they, on top of that, did an additional $1.4 million.
So my beef is not with the 600,000. I think that's entirely appropriate that goes to offsetting the tax rate. And I think there's more in there too that could be used to offset the tax rate, but I think it's too much. And that money, the auditors, there's two different things going on here. One is how big the unreserved fund balance is. And the other one is that using unreserved, how much unreserved fund balance we're using to fund operating expenses. Most of the time, a lot of that unreserved fund balance goes to one-time expenses. That is appropriate. And we're doing that in the special warrant articles. I think that and I'm not saying we get rid of all of it because that would be a huge tax spike, but we have to start narrowing that gap between what we're spending and what we're collecting in taxes.
I guess what I could offer to you, Elizabeth, is I could share that concern back with the select board, and maybe we can have them address that at the public hearing. Because again, that really, they use that as, rather than pulling out individual articles, the first thing that they didn't want to do is they didn't want to go against the will of the voters and reduce reclamation. The voters said, we're approving 500,000, put it into the operating budget, put it into default. They did not want to pull that additional funding out of the budget. They did not. They thought the will of the voters was to continue to fund our roads at that level. So they did not want to pull that out. And then I think they did not want to pull out other individual one-time projects. What I could do is bring these concerns back to the select board, and they could have perhaps a response at the public hearing.
So, I mean, that's fine, Derek, and I get that. And I don't think that they're looking at this budget and how lean it is. There are not enough one-time expenses to justify that spending that amount of money. So you're right about the $500,000 for the road plan. That is an acceptable one-time expense that you could cover from unreserved fund balance. But if we can start getting, maybe this is the year that we keep the unreserved fund balance big. And we sit on it for a year and sort out what's going on. I mean, if everybody's so worried about what's going to happen, this is starting to snowball already. We're already putting in more money every year from the unreserved fund balance to offset the operating expenses. And I think no good can come of it. So, I mean, they don't have to address it at the public hearing if they don't want to, but I do think this is the kind of thing, Mark, that you should be going back to the board and talking to them about.
I know I've taken some notes, Elizabeth, and when we have our next meeting, I will mention it to them.
Okay.
Did we have a roll call?
No, we're still in discussion. Richard, I think you had a question also.
Yeah, well, the state recommends what the fund balance of a town should be, I believe. What is it they recommend for Goffstown?
So if you give me just a second, they as similar to the Government Finance Officers Association, basically the the group of government finance people, they recommend a range. And let me.
If I have that information available, if you'd like.
Oh, yeah. If you could rescue me, I'd appreciate it.
Do you want me to share screen or just explain?
Yeah. Yeah. No, if you want to share screen, that'd be great.
Okay.
9 to 17, hopefully.
Okay. Let me see if I can make that any bigger.
If you could zoom in on the fund balance. Yeah.
Okay. So this lower half of the screen that you're seeing is the 2020 fund balance retention guidelines as recommended by the Department of Revenue. And as you can see, the range that they're recommending is between 5% as a minimum, 17% as a maximum. The town is currently, as of the tax rate setting time, hovering at that 13 to 14%, 13.97 to be exact, based on the calculations at year end 2019, and taking into consideration the amounts voted at the 2020 town meeting. So we are currently on the higher side of that recommended range. However, that is very important to note for cash flow purposes that that $7 million is not all cash. It includes assets that are due to the town, outstanding tax bills and whatnot. And that cash flow is not only to sustain the town's budget, but also the school's budget, which is approximately $40 million. And so the school will draw as needed every month. And the school's drawdown schedule ranges from about $1.5 to $3.5 to $4 million a month, depending on the month for the cash flow. And on average, they're about $3 million a month in cash flow needs. So when we collect those taxes, we hold them in the town's account and disperse to the school as needed, and disperse for town operations as well. And then this fund balance does help maintain that cash flow throughout the year.
So it sounds like we're in pretty good shape there as far as what they recommend.
Yes, yes, we are.
Great. A couple things I'd like to just add for context here. Looking at the tax rate, the 1.4 million is it's around 80 cents based on the evaluation we have here. So that's about what we're talking about, $300,000 home. That's about $240 in savings. That 1.4 million. Just for folks to have that in context here. What else? But I hear Elizabeth's concerns, but I think sitting on this committee over the years, I've also seen tax rate go up as our surplus also goes up. So think about that. I think at last tax rate setting, it was like 250,000 that hadn't been budgeted to go to offset taxes. Is that correct, Eric?
So last year, during the budget process, the select board told the budget committee they would use $125,000 at tax rate setting. Because of CARES Act funds and some other funds that came in above what we anticipated this year, the board increased that 125,000 to 250,000 at tax rate setting. And Danielle's got kind of a chart that shows a little bit of the history the last couple of years of what has been used for fund balance. Danielle, can you maybe zoom in just a little bit and then, yeah, and scroll down. So you see in 2019, there was $1.5 million from fund balance. that was all in individual warrant articles. Whether it was there were 3 different capital reserve funds, the DPW building project, the additional road plan funds. Let's see, parking lot for PD, impound, you know, a whole bunch of items were separate. Last year, there was $325,000 that went into capital reserve funds, plus the $500,000 for the road plan. And then they also promised during the budget to use $125,000. When we got to fund or tax rate setting this fall, the select board made a decision to add in an additional $125,000 to maintain a modest tax rate increase of 10 cents.
And right now, what we're looking at is an even tax rate, if I'm correct.
If the operating budget with all of the recommended, no, I don't want to misspeak. Hold on just a second. I think the operating budget would be a level tax rate, and then the only tax impact would be the Crispin House and the Main Street articles.
Which that would be voters choosing
That'd be
whether or
voters'
not.
decision. Yeah.
And the even tax rate, for just clarification with everyone, would be with the 1.4 million promised at tax rate setting time. All right, any further discussion?
This is Jeff. Danielle, from Munis, do we have an updated year-to-date spending versus the budget? So we have an actuals versus budget at this point?
I'm sorry, it was a little hard to hear. You were asking if there's a year-to-date budget report for the expenses for the town's general fund. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, that budget report is posted each month to the town's website. I can double check for you if there's a specific line, but that report is available on the town's website. When you go to the home page, there's a section that says government. Underneath that says budget, and that'll bring you directly to the budget page where you can see the year-to-date reports. The November report has not yet been posted since the month just ended on November 30th, and we're still in that first 10 days or so of December. So we're working on wrapping up those reports now, and we'll be posting those by the end of this week.
Okay, thank you.
All right, further discussion here before we take up a vote. All right, Derek, can you just go over procedure quickly? I know we have some folks who it's their first time on the committee. So we're going to vote on the general fund that we've reviewed and the EMS as presented, and then can you just go over the process and what how it actually ends up on the ballot, the recommendation?
Yep. So what you're doing right now is you're not taking a vote on the budget per se. What you're doing is you are voting to move the budget at this point to public hearing. So we are required to hold a public hearing on the budget and all of the appropriation articles. So that would be all the capital reserve funds. That would be the SAFER grant, the library warrant article, even though it doesn't use any property taxes, it is an appropriation article, as well as Main Street, Crispin House, and we are finishing up 2 collective bargaining agreement negotiations. So you'll move that to public hearing. That will be the second week of January. I talked to Scott Gross today. We're trying to button up the time, the location for that public hearing. And you will have a public hearing, can do a presentation on what is in the budget, what is in the special articles, what's in the different articles. That's an opportunity for the public to say what they think about it, if they would recommend any changes to it. At that point, the budget committee would vote to finalize the budget and also make recommendations on articles. Because those articles are coming from the select board, the amount is decided by the select board. So the budget committee wouldn't be changing the amount. You'd simply be voting to recommend or not recommend. But that's pretty much the process. We're just trying to move it at this point to the public hearing. And then after that, the budget committee would take their votes. And typically what you do is you do it after the public hearing is closed that evening. So we can button everything up that night, prepare all the state forms, and then have budget committee members come in and sign those forms so it can be posted with the annual warrant for the deliberative session.
Great. Thank you. Any questions there?
Yeah, I actually do have one. So this particular motion doesn't include any of the special articles, correct? This is just on the general fund budget? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
So the motion on the floor is to move general fund and EMS revenue fund to public hearing. I'll call the roll. Skylar isn't here. Dennis isn't here. Spencer isn't here. Bill Cordis.
Yeah.
Thank you. Greg Flegel.
Yes.
Alexander.
Yes.
Ian McNinney.
Yeah.
Jeff O'Brien.
Yes.
Triplett.
Yes.
Vote yes. Richard Manzo.
Yes.
Richard Fletcher.
Yes.
Kurt Talbot.
Yes.
Elizabeth DeBrell.
Yes.
Selectman Lemay.
Yes.
All right. Unanimous. Thank you. All right. So we'll be meeting next week and we'll be taking up sewer precincts and then moving those to public hearing along with the special articles. Is that right, Derek?
And the water department budget.
The water precincts, yep. So we'll take that up next time.
So the special articles will be part of the public hearing. Again, those are proposed by the select board, and we'll include that as part of the presentation. And then after the presentation, the budget committee can vote if they want to recommend or not recommend those appropriations.
Derek, didn't we last year typically recommend them before the public hearing?
You did. There's really no requirement for you to do that. And I think what we did at the public hearing last year was ask you to revote those. I think last year there was a little bit of negotiation on the amount of one of the special articles. So that may have been why the budget committee did that.
And is that the situation this year? I think that we had the Main Street, the same amount that was presented to us when we.
So there was a change. There was a change in what was presented to the budget committee. The select board reduced that amount to $15,000, and that's the same amount that was appropriated in 2020. So the select board has moved forward with that reduced amount.
So we won't be discussing it all and recommending the special articles before public hearing next week then?
I mean, I guess that would be up to the budget committee chair how we'd like to do it and how you want to present it. There's no requirement that you do that, but if you wanted to, you could.
Mr. Chair, if I could just say, I just think it's really important that based on past practices, we have typically done this and put recommendations forward to public hearing. I think we should stay consistent on
that. With that, and I think that I think we had good conversations last year because of that process.
I think
I
in
think
most
it
years,
allows us more time to
I
discuss
think
that.
in most years, we've taken the special articles, discussed them, and voted to recommend or not recommend to the public hearing.
Yep. All right, so we'll take that up at our next meeting, same time, same place on the 15th. All right. Unless there's anything else that folks want to address, motion would be in order.
Okay.
Motion from Richard Manta, second from Fred Platt. Discussion. Oh, just lost my sheet here. One sec. All right. Skylar isn't here. Dennis isn't here. Spencer is not here. Bill Cordis.
Yes.
Rick Flegel.
Yes.
Joe. Eileen. Eileen. All right. Jeff. Fred.
Yes.
Oh yes. Richard Manzo.
Yes.
Richard Fletcher.
Yes.
Richard Talbot.
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Yes.
Selectman Lemay.
Yes.
All right. All adjourned. See you next week.